I stood at the doorstep of my son's new home, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. I started to offer my congratulations on their move, but before I could finish, Elizabeth snatched the envelope from my hands. Her abrupt action left me momentarily speechless. Elizabeth curtly thanked me for the money and asked if there was anything else, suggesting I leave quickly if not. I felt Thomas tense beside me, ready to confront Elizabeth, but I held him back with a subtle gesture. Trying to smooth things over, I apologized for coming unannounced and offered our help if they ever needed it. Elizabeth's response was shockingly harsh, calling us dirty retirees and expressing her displeasure at our presence in their territory. I was stunned, unable to reconcile this woman with the kind-faced bride I'd seen in photos. Elizabeth then noticed the gift I was holding and demanded to know what it was. With a trembling voice, I explained it was a handmade teddy bear for their newborn daughter. To my horror, Elizabeth knocked the bear from my hands, declaring it might cause allergies and ordering us to take it back. Her words, calling it filthy, echoed painfully in my mind. Thomas, seeing my distress, calmly told Elizabeth we understood her wishes and would cease all contact, including with our son Keith. Elizabeth slammed the door in our faces, even locking it for good measure. As I stood there, still in shock, Thomas picked up the discarded teddy bear and made a phone call. I'm Sharon Andrews, spending my retirement years with my husband Thomas in a small town. In my younger days, I had a successful career, thanks in part to Thomas's support when many still believed women should stay home after having children. We have one son, Keith, who left home dramatically 10 years ago to become a musician. Though Thomas pretends not to care, I know he secretly follows Keith's career, watching music shows and searching social media for news of his son. I spent my days openly hoping for Keith's success, while Thomas kept his anticipation hidden. One day, our son suddenly returned home. Keith apologized for the trouble and worry he'd caused, as well as for his unexpected visit. His well-tailored suit made him look more like a businessman than a musician. Thomas's voice was stern as he admonished Keith for the sudden visit, but I caught a glimpse of a smile tugging at his lips. I gently told Keith that his father was actually happy to see him, despite his gruff exterior. As we settled in the living room, Thomas brought out a special bottle of wine he'd been saving, likely for when Keith's band became famous. The atmosphere was awkward at first, with father and son exchanging stilted conversation over their glasses. I busied myself in the kitchen, preparing snacks and favorite dishes, hoping the food and alcohol would help ease the tension. As the evening progressed, the mood lightened. I commented on how grown-up Keith looked, to which he laughed, reminding me he was already 32. Thomas agreed that Keith had changed, not in appearance but in character. Keith then shared his story, how reality had been harsher than expected after leaving home, forcing him to juggle part-time jobs with band activities. When his music career didn't take off, he finally understood why we had tried to stop him. Eventually, he gave up his dream of being a musician, found a corporate job, got married, and now travels the world as a busy businessman. Thomas looked a bit sad when he learned Keith had gotten married without our knowledge. I felt a surge of excitement when Keith mentioned he had become a father. I couldn't help but ask about the baby's gender and if he had any photos, my heart racing at the thought of our first grandchild. Keith proudly showed us pictures of his wife and daughter on his smartphone, his face softening with love. Thomas commented on how beautiful they both were, and I agreed, noting how kind Keith's wife looked. Keith then invited us to visit their new home, explaining that he'd be leaving for a business trip soon and wanted us to be there for his wife and child if needed. I eagerly agreed, assuring Keith we'd do anything for our daughter-in-law and grandchild. Thomas, in his gruff way, advised Keith to be a strong pillar for his family. As we made plans for our visit, I felt a mix of joy and nervousness. On the day of our visit, Thomas was visibly anxious, his hand shaking as he reached for the intercom button. I gently teased him about his nervousness, reminding him to act natural. When I pressed the intercom, a slightly irritated female voice answered. I introduced us cheerfully, hoping to ease any tension. To our surprise, the connection was abruptly cut off. We exchanged confused glances, wondering if something was amiss. Before we could discuss it, the door opened, revealing Elizabeth, Keith's wife. While she looked just like the photo Keith had shown us, her expression was far from the gentle smile we had seen. Instead, she wore a look of obvious annoyance. I was taken aback by Elizabeth's blunt demand for money as soon as we arrived. Her demeanor was a far cry from the gentle woman we'd seen in photos. Despite our shock, we tried to maintain our composure, presenting the envelope with our housewarming gift. Before I could finish my congratulations, Elizabeth snatched the envelope from my hands. She curtly thanked us and asked if we had any other business, suggesting we leave quickly. Thomas, barely containing his anger, started to step forward, but I held him back with a subtle gesture. I apologized for our intrusion and offered our help if they ever needed it. Elizabeth's response was shockingly harsh, calling us dirty retirees and expressing her displeasure at our presence. I was stunned, unable to reconcile this woman with the kind-faced bride I'd seen in photos. When Elizabeth noticed the teddy bear I'd brought for the baby, her frown deepened. I explained it was a handmade gift for our granddaughter, but Elizabeth knocked it from my hands. She accused us of potentially causing allergies with the filthy toy and ordered us to take it back. Her words echoed painfully in my mind, the term filthy stuffed animal repeating over and over. Thomas, seeing my distress, calmly told Elizabeth we understood her wishes and would cease all contact. Elizabeth slammed the door in our faces, even locking it for good measure. As I stood there, still in shock, Thomas picked up the discarded teddy bear and made a phone call. The next day, as I was gardening to clear my mind, Thomas called out that my phone was ringing. When I checked it, I was startled to see 37 notifications from an unknown number, all within seconds of each other. I jumped when my phone rang again. It was from the same unknown caller who had already tried 37 times. The eeriness of the situation almost made me drop my phone. Thomas asked if I was going to answer, frowning at the unfamiliar number on the screen. He wondered if it was a prank or one of those scam calls we'd been hearing about. I replied shakily that even for a prank, 38 calls seemed excessive. Thomas fell silent at my words. The phone went quiet for a moment, only to start ringing again immediately. Thomas decided to answer it himself. To our surprise, it was Elizabeth on the other end, her voice shrill with desperation. She apologized profusely, saying she hadn't known something. Thomas asked who was calling, switching to speaker mode so I could hear. Elizabeth continued her frantic apology, identifying herself as Keith's wife. I tried to calm her down, genuinely confused about what was happening. Thomas's voice turned cold as he asked if she had heard from Keith about his parents. Elizabeth confirmed this, sobbing as she recounted her conversation with Keith. He had called her the night after we visited, angry that she had turned away his parents. She had tried to justify her actions, saying she felt overwhelmed and didn't want strangers in her space. That's when Keith revealed the truth about who we were. Apparently, Elizabeth's parents' company was on the brink of bankruptcy. They had only told Keith, not wanting to worry their daughter during her new motherhood. Keith had asked us for help, knowing our positions as former chairperson and vice chairperson of a large corporation. We had agreed, touched by Keith's return after 10 years. Elizabeth then revealed, between sobs, that she was a fan of the teddy bear company I had founded, and that Keith had told me this, leading to my handmade gift. As I listened to Elizabeth's emotional outburst, I felt a complex mix of emotions, not towards her, but towards Keith. I felt a pang of disappointment, remembering how I had asked Keith to keep my identity as the founder of the famous teddy bear company a secret. Despite having stepped back from the company, I had poured my heart into making a special bear for Elizabeth and our granddaughter, hoping to bring them joy without revealing who I was. Elizabeth's desperate pleas for forgiveness and help for her parents tugged at my heartstrings. I looked uncertainly at Thomas, whose face was set in a stern expression. Thomas told Elizabeth that we couldn't make a hasty decision, given the large sum of money involved. He said we needed to discuss it and would get back to her, then abruptly ended the call. I asked Thomas if he could forgive Elizabeth, expressing my own inclination to do so. After a long, silent stare between us, Thomas relented, but warned that he hadn't fully forgiven her. In the months that followed, we provided the promised support to Elizabeth's parents, saving their company. Elizabeth's behavior changed dramatically, frequently visiting us and showing genuine remorse. Thomas was still wary, but slowly warming up to her with my mediation. Today, Elizabeth brought our granddaughter to visit. As I watched Thomas cautiously offer his finger to the baby, who grasped it tightly, I couldn't help but smile. Elizabeth's gentle smile, so like the one in Keith's photo, seemed truly sincere now. I felt relieved that we had managed to rebuild our relationship with her. As our granddaughter reached out to me, grasping my finger and smiling, I felt grateful that we had reconciled, for her sake as well as ours. This journey had been challenging, but as I looked at our growing family, I knew it had been worth it.